you?
I'm good, thanks, Louise. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very, very well, thank you. I'm loving your earrings.
Thank you. They're lovely, aren't they?
Wait, oh, I don't think I've seen those before, have I?
I don't think you have, no.
Are they new?
No, I bought them in Florence in 2015. They're very close to my heart because I think they're absolutely lovely. And I bought them as a gift to myself after I did a gift for Eleonora in Florence.
Oh, that is wonderful. That's a great point for us to talk about that installation and where it came from. So can you tell us about a gift for Eleonora, please?
Well, a gift for Eleonora was originally an art installation proposal that I put in because I was very excited to see the opportunity to be able to do this in one of the top sites in Florence, cultural heritage sites, and that's really what triggered me to want to have a go at it. And I was lucky enough to be chosen, and it changed from an art installation to actually a performance installation, which I did in the Cappella de Pazzi in the Basilica di Santa Croce. And it was the most incredible journey for me of discovering this wonderful woman called Eleonora di Toledo, the Duchess of Florence, the first Duchess of Florence, married to Cosimo I de' Medici. And it was a wonderful discovery of who she was and really exploring that, because she's always just represented as the woman who had 11 children, if we can imagine what on earth that must have been like. And she was an incredible woman who did lots of things that were fascinating, but most specifically it was her life in terms of her health. She had lots of problems. She had tuberculosis, malaria, she had polio in her early years. And I really used it to think about my interests in health and well-being and how you can live a good life, whatever you got in front of you. And obviously she was a very rich woman, being the Duchess of Florence, but it was about what really seemed to keep her having a vibrant life full of enjoyment. So yeah, it was really humbling to be able to perform her.
So, Alison, I always think that you are a woman who lives a vibrant life. I think, I don't know how long we've known each other. It might be a year and a half. I can't quite remember. In all of that time, your feet have never been still. Not only are you very passionate about learning, and we're lucky enough to have you as a graduate coach of Simply Changing, which we're very proud of, and you have thrown yourself into the learning process, but you've also been doing amazing things like kayaking the Camino, all sorts of intrepid travels to Wales and Scotland and all over the world. So, Alison, do you recognise something of yourself in Eleonora?
Yes, I think I do. And I think it's a recognition of your own resourcefulness, your own resilience to whatever is going on in your life. And we all, in our lives come up against things. And I think the greatest gift is to be able to really take stock with yourself and search within and really look to that resourcefulness. And for me, I performed that piece, as I've said, in Florence, and then I performed it in the wonderful Roman baths at Bath. I was invited to do that for the Bath Literature Festival. And I can remember at the end of that performance, I'd gone from being so nervous at the start I had quite an attack of nerves. And I had to, as any performer does, absolutely get on top of that, knowing that once I begin, I'll be fine, which I was. But at the end, I've never felt such a feeling of nobody can touch me, nobody can get to me. I mean, I cannot, it's really hard to explain it. It's like a sense of I absolutely know who I am, and I've just done that. And that's just a personal thing, but obviously Eleonora de Toledo gave me that opportunity to go through quite a journey and discover that in the end you can look within yourself and you can find that inner strength if you need it. That it's important for me to always be moving forward in terms of what I want to be exploring or experimenting with, and that comes from probably what I'm best known for way back, which is the subject of devising theatre, for which I wrote my first published book in 1994. Sounds so long ago. And devising is all about creating and making and starting from any point you like. It can be from literally anything. If you want to create or make a piece of theatre, you know, you've got to know what it is you want to start with. So that's just a simple introduction to that. And so I've worked devising things, you know, for many, many years in all sorts of ways. And at the beginning, that was particularly related to creating and making theatre, and companies whose work were, you know, could be a theatre and education company using devising to make a piece for young people. It could be a company doing reminiscence theatre, making theatre for the elderly and going into care homes. And doing reminiscence theatre where they had the opportunity to reflect back on their lives and just have a lovely time in the now of their stories. There's lots of things there. So obviously once I was in my academic world as well, I always still wanted to research, practice and make for myself. So I did a particular one-woman show that I toured called What Shall I Do with My Amstrad? Because if you remember the old Amstrad computers, and basically the turning point for that was when I had my son. After that, I wanted to be doing something really creative, and I used the content of things that came up for me with that, having a small child, or a baby actually, really, and I had this single bag which had all those sort of things that any mother will know and identify with here, where you've got to take all these things with you and it's all a bit weird and wonderful at the beginning because you suddenly got this child and so on. And so that became like the content, this bag that I had. But also in the bag, I had all sorts of things. It's very hard probably to imagine this, so I'm not going to tell you all the detail of it. But essentially, I got an Amstrad keyboard and different things out. And I had already got the casing of the whole computer there. And I smashed it up. And for each thing, it was an analogy with something that came out of the bag to do with being a mother and having a baby. So it was really a piece about how am I going to make my life work being a mother and a full-time working person, and have a nice time at the same time. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself doing that piece. So from that, in order to answer your question, just that it gives you an idea of the theatre and where I began in terms of the link to devising. But then I became very, very interested it was actually a turning point when I became Professor of Theatre Studies and Contemporary Performance at Loughborough University. And I really got interested in the arts in a wider sense. And that's how I came to really start exploring installation and what that's about. And I absolutely loved that. And that included all sorts of really exciting research, where I got invited by the director, Deborah Warner, to go and visit her in Australia to see her amazing project, which was called the Angel Project in Perth in Western Australia. And then later, I went to see it 3 years later in New York after all the terrible 9/11. And it was just so different, as you might imagine. And I went to sound installations, just so many different things exploring. And that resulted in a book called Reframing the Theatrical. So I crossed over and through and into a whole load of other disciplines that were so exciting. And I suppose the absolute core of what you're asking me about goes back to after I had my son and I was a mother, working mother, was after my first book, Devising Theatre. I really wanted to do another book that allowed me to still do my job, still be a mother and have time for that. And so I created the second book that fitted for that, which was called Performing Women. I did 2 editions of that, but the first one's probably the important one, because I did create and design how I could make that work for myself. And I think that's probably key for me in lots of things. And I had the privilege of interviewing all my favourite women performers and researching and being in conversation with them about the themes that were important to me at that time, which were motherhood and how you are a performer and have young children. And that was a real turning point for me in terms of being able just to have a conversation like we are now. And it led also to some absolutely wonderful opportunities, like my Radio 4 series, where it was through all that research. And that's what I did when I knew that I managed to launch the book at the National Theatre in a ticketed in conversation with the wonderful Brenda Blethyn and Mira Sayal. And it was after that fabulous time I had there that the dream came that she said, would you like to do a Radio 4 series? So that was phenomenal, and I suppose opened up all the possibilities of ways of creating, because creativity is in my core.
Thank you so much. So Mira Sayal, Victoria Wood, Brenda Blethyn, just falling off the tongue, just like that. Amazing, iconic, funny, deep women who have an effect on in everything that they do. They have an effect. People respond to them really positively.
They're all wonderful. I mean, everybody I interviewed, because they're all so different, and I love people, and I really love connecting with people and working out how they tick. You know, I've always been fascinated by people.
Throughout the programme, you are making a difference to people, even through lockdown. You've been doing some amazing work from a voluntary point of view with the NHS. And so you said earlier that you really like people and that you want to understand what makes them tick, and that makes a perfect coach, doesn't it? Can you say, without breaking any levels of confidentiality, but can you say, you know, how you feel about the work that you have been doing with the NHS? Oh, I'm going to have a sip as well then.
Yes, well, of course, you're absolutely right. I can't break any confidentiality, but I can tell you that it has brought me so much joy to be able to give something back. That's the first thing, because I knew before lockdown, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do with the coaching. So when I saw a call for the volunteers to coach frontline NHS staff, I just knew immediately, I thought I'd really like to do that. And I think it's just been such a pleasure. And as you will know, of course, Sue Knight, who I'm very inspired by in her writings and her work, says that sometimes we're drawn to a coachee or client because for ourselves we need it as well. And it's a kind of a mutual sort of, it's a conversation of sharing, but maybe you're both getting something from it. And I like that idea. And I think, particularly if I think of a particular client who I've worked with from April to this end of this month, so 3 months actually, I think of her, she is a senior staff nurse in a critical care unit in a London hospital. And when I started working with her, I was hearing all these, you know, the things that she was dealing with. Let's say was working with COVID patients, obviously, who are on ventilators, and we've seen lots of programs, haven't we, about some of these situations. Absolutely incredible stuff. And also, you know, sharing with me, obviously, you know, sometimes if she'd had, you know, a series of night shifts and things had happened, that kind of thing. And yet, you know, we were put together by, you know, someone from the hospital and someone who was organizing the actual coaching. So they didn't know, I mean, you know, it wasn't like it was probably that obvious to them, but something put us together. And it was incredible how, as it evolved, it became clear that this person had a dream and that she wanted eventually to get a lecturing post in a university in nursing. And as it's evolved, she's applied for a post, and I only heard, you know, in the last week that she had actually been offered the job, and I cannot begin to tell you how thrilling that was. It was so thrilling.
Oh, it's incredible. Like you say, with your, you made a comment earlier about people being drawn to you, and Sue Knight believing that also. And through my studies, many of my past tutors have said things like, you will get what it is that you need through the process. And the fact that she was under all of the pressure of being a frontline worker in a critical care unit, she set time aside to be coached. She happened upon you, Alison, who is perfectly placed as a professor in a number of universities with all the experience that you've got, you know, to guide her through the coaching process so that she can present herself really well. And she was going through COVID-19 through the interview process as well, I think I remember.
Yes.
So jolly well done to her
Mm.
for achieving all of that. What a smart cookie, really. And congrats to her and to you. Well done, Alison, because
Thank you.
I know how
Thank
much
you.
that actually did mean to you,
Mm.
being involved in that process. It's such an honour and a privilege to coach, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Louise. Absolutely. It is a privilege and an honour.
And we always consider, don't we, that our coachees, I can see that you're getting quite emotional just there, Alison. Um, we always say that we as coaches really admire those people who are brave and courageous enough to explore coaching as a way of fulfilling their dreams. And through that process, you quite rightly said, you discovered she had a dream. So, you know, she was finding her way through the crisis through coaching, but she also held on to her dream and has actualized it through the whole of this lockdown period, which is quite remarkable. Thank you for sharing that, Alison. It's absolutely wonderful to hear. I'm going to just go forward again to the idea that you had when that introduced you to Brenda Blethyn, Victoria Wood, Mira Sayal, and this was your idea that led to your Radio 4 program, which was very successful. And I'm just wondering, how did you make that happen? You said you had an idea. How did you then make that happen? Had you discovered through your work to that date that if you put your mind to something, you can create something out of an idea? Did you have that strong belief in yourself? And what skills did you put to use? So it's a big question, I know, but how did you make it happen?
Well, it's a good question, because if I said to you that I believed and I believe I can make things happen, it really sounds quite, well, possibly arrogant. I don't know. And I would hate it to sound like that, because it's just something that it's really hard to actually explain it. But it is to do with self-belief, and it is to do with my father, I think, who was a businessman. He always said to me, he didn't say the exact words of this, but he always conveyed to me that you in life can do whatever you want to do. And I don't know if he conveyed you can be whatever you want to be, actually. I'm not sure about that at all, but he did give me a sense that there's a possibility of doing what you want to. And he also gave me a sense that learning and doing new things was important. I think both my parents, were passionate people in terms of believing education's really important in life for different reasons, but they both valued education just as I do. I mean, it's fundamental to be able to have education in our lives and to always be learning. But I know that I can do it. I know I can do it. I know I can have an incredibly curious conversation with those wonderful women. If I give one example, the lovely Jenny Clare, who, when I interviewed her a long time ago, had just, obviously she's known for a stand-up comedy and how funny she is and all that side of things, but she just brought out her first novel when I interviewed her on Radio 4, and I've recently read her 6th novel, which I'm going to plug actually, because it's so good, called Inheritance. And it's fantastic. And I thought, crikey, so she's done another 5 novels since then. And I'm curious to know what that must mean for her, because as a writer myself, I'm really interested in the process of how you create all sorts of writing. And also that, she has actually, in a sense, kind of transformed herself into something else. I know she talks about that. She calls herself a lady writer, which is different to being the stand-up comedian. So I'll let you know. So that, I suppose, is about self-belief. But listen, sometimes fate does not give us necessarily, we can't, we'd love to think we can have absolutely everything. And if we don't get a particular thing, but we get something else, that's for a reason. I believe that. In the same way, the people you meet, like when I met you, you're on my pathway there, and hopefully you will think the same, vice versa. And it was an extraordinary meeting of two women where they were coming together in their lives, and you know, huge amounts of learning and discovery, and it's all contributed to everything of who I am and what I'm doing.
That's wonderful. Alison, thank you very much indeed for that. Alison, through the time that we've spent together today, it's almost just touched the tip of the iceberg of the person that you are, the things that you have achieved, and more importantly, how you have achieved those things. So every time I speak to you, I discover more and more about the quality of the person that you are, the person who is expansive in her thinking and immerses herself in the experience, so that you discover, and you don't just discover things for discovering's sake. You are discovering things to be able to make a difference. And you have lived an incredibly creative life, and making it, certainly in terms of making things happen. So we really are very proud that you are Simply Changing graduate coach. Hugely proud of that, and thank you for choosing us. What happens now? So this life, I suppose, embarks anew. It's a new phase in your life. What are your plans for the future?
Well, first of all, Louise, thank you very much for all that you've said. I'm really grateful that you've said that, and I'm very grateful that we met and I did choose to come to Simply Changing. Had an absolutely fabulous experience and would recommend it seriously to anyone that's thinking about training as a coach. Go for it, because whatever happens, you're going to learn so much. And as I've already said today, I'm always learning. I think the second thing is that, you know, a life that is lived well is just what we're all wanting, isn't it? Because it's certainly what I want. And whilst I want that, I want to keep, you know, moving forward, doing things I want to do and loving doing them. And I love the life I have, and it's all about being in the flow and what comes along as well, and that's a really important thing for me. So I am hoping life will flow the Radio 4 in, and it will or it won't. But also, as I think I told you last year, I'd sort of written a kind of first draft of a novel, and I'd just not looked at it for a very long time for lots of reasons. And I've decided to pick it up and address this because I really would like to publish it. I've also been working on another book that is evolving. It's really evolving, and it's about sharing with people the coaching experience in ways that perhaps might make them think, I want to go and be a coach. Or actually people who are coaches, they might think, oh, that's interesting. She's dealing with those case studies or stories that brought in those kind of NLP tools, techniques from the toolbox. And is personal as well. It's links to my own curious life that I have had. So those things are really ongoing. And I've also recently been invited to join an international project, which is for millennials, an age group that I think have really probably struggled an awful lot with COVID-19. And I can't imagine for them all the things that must come up. So I'm really thrilled to be going to do that. And all the coaches on that project are NLP practitioners, master NLP practitioners. And it's an absolute privilege and pleasure to going to be doing something on that. And of course, my own coaching work one-to-one with people. And I know you'll have my details if anyone does want to get in touch with me. Do it through my email address, Louise, which you have, because my website's down at the moment. But I really am interested to coach people who really want to change something in their lives, and they're ready to do it, and they want to do it. And I think of it as the next new chapter in your life, whatever it is. It could be a career change, or people who've been made redundant, or thinking about retiring but don't really want to. or just building the confidence or self-presentation skills, public speaking, anything. And I'm up there for it. So, and it's with gratitude as a graduate coach that I say that to you, because if I hadn't met you and done the training and continue to do the training and be a work in progress, because that's what I am, a work in progress, living the life I love. So thank you so much for the opportunity today to chat with you, Louise.
Thank you, Alison, so much. Thanks for giving us the benefit of your time and your experience and your inspiration. There will be a lot of people listening to this who really will connect with you. So I'm going to pop your contact details here on the end of the video, so you'll have Alison's email address, so that you can contact her. She is based face-to-face, obviously. She is based in the Leicestershire area, and of course we coach by Zoom or Skype or FaceTime, so you will be able to connect with her wherever you are in the world. Alison, thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
A pleasure too. Lovely to see you, Louise.
And you, Alison. Take care. Lots of love.
Take care. Lots of love to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.